Hi, and welcome to today's scheduled stream. This time around, I'm going to do something entirely different. Um, I have for a while been running a closed, whitelisted Minecraft server for my closest friends. And anyone that has ever run a Minecraft server knows that it kind of prefers to be restarted at least once a day. Um, Otherwise, it just winds down and becomes laggy and sluggish and stuff. So one of the things that I could do is, of course, put it on a host somewhere. But since I'm just running it from home, I kind of need a tool to help me keep the server's health in good condition. So this time around, I'm gonna start a project that will become a server launcher, and it will then take care of restarting the server for me once every 24 hours. At some point, I could easily add in scheduling features and maybe a backup feature and possibly some other control mechanisms, messages in chat and whatnot, but we'll see where this project will go. For now, let's get stuff started. I'm gonna be writing this server launcher, controller, monitor, software, whatever you want to call it, in C Sharp. So um, let's get Visual Studio started. And here we go. Let's create a new project, do a WinForms project. Yeah, no, I'm gonna go here, C Sharp, streaming projects, and we'll put it here. There we go. Minecraft server launcher. There we go. Okay. As per usual, I'll start up by doing a little bit of house cleaning. Main farm. Yes, I would like that. Let's stuff this in a folder. We never know how many forms we might end up having. It's nice having things organized. And let's put a title on here. Minecraft server launcher. And we'll do center screen startup position. Okay. As per usual, doing any kind of desktop application development typically involves some kind of UI design. I guess down the line we'll decide how the UI for this will look, and just take it from there. In any case, to start any instance of Java, you kind of need to specify the jar that you want it to start. So we at least know that we need to start a process somewhere. We also know that we will probably need some kind of path configuration to the Minecraft server folder and a lot of other things. So just for the sake of having something to work with, I've copied over an old instance of a vanilla Minecraft setup, and this will be the Minecraft server that we will be building this application up against. Since this is running on Windows, it of course needs Java pre-installed, and we can. I've created a batch file to start up the server here, and this is the startup command. Now this sets aside about 2 gigabytes of memory to run this particular vanilla instance, and I've also specified that I don't want the default GUI shown, which is a parameter that the Minecraft server accepts. So this will effectively be the command we need to execute to start up the server. Okay, so to get this started, one thing that would be nice to have is some kind of configuration option where we can effectively create a profile for running this particular Minecraft server instance. Down the line, it could be interesting adding more servers, giving us the option of running multiple different servers. And we could potentially add in separate scheduling for each individual server, depending on what kind of environment we need to run. But let's get some stuff done. First of all, let's see if we can figure out a way to construct some kind of configuration for a single server instance. Now, usually I like to put my individual classes in a separate namespace and subfolder so I can keep things organized. So let's get my usual setup, sharp libs, and then do one for Minecraft. And I will probably also need some kind of configuration setup for it. So let's do a server profile config class. Put that in here. Just to get it out of the applications namespace, we'll remove that. Let's get a constructor on here. And copy the class name. There we go. Now, one thing that we definitely need to have in a fixed location is a reference to the configuration file that contains the actual server profile. So let's get some path handling in here. And in this instance, I think I'm gonna go with the typical path for shared configurations across multiple user profiles. We have a folder called programmed data on the C drive. It comes standard with the environment variables, so we'll make use of that. And just to have it pre-initialized, we'll do an internal config path equals nothing, and then do a private void initialize config path. The reason for doing this is just to do the path handling once when this particular class is instantiated. It will effectively work as a global configuration for any number of server profiles, or we could put it in a collection. We'll see. Okay, first of all, we need to grab the path. So let's get that. Get folder path. All of these special folders are Windows common path locations, system locations, profile locations, and such. And the one at the very top, application data, points to the program data folder. So let's grab that one. Now, one of the interesting things about using the environment folders is that depending on which version of Windows this is running on, and this of course also depends on the .NET Framework version, up to and including Framework 3.5, you can still run this on Windows XP and older versions of the Windows Server family. Anything above Framework 3.5 requires newer versions of Windows, such as 7 or the Server 2008 family. So what happens is, if this is run on Windows XP or previous versions, there might be a trailing backslash on the path. On newer systems, this particular trailing backslash doesn't exist. Since we need to create a subfolder to store our configuration profiles, we'll start by making sure that there's actually a trailing backslash on the path. So if we actually did get a path from the environment, we'll check if the last character of the path is different from a backslash, and if that is the case, then we will simply add it. There we go. Next up, we'll add in the subfolder name for our product, and for now we will just call it Minecraft Server Launcher, and then add a trailing backslash. That way we don't have to do any kind of path sanitation afterwards. Alright, let's grab this and place a call to the initializer. Now, when this is done, we'll put this in config path. Actually, why don't we make this a property instead? Public string config path. Yeah, we'll just name it path. Do get set. Actually, we'll do a private set. Now, by doing this, we can access the path at which the server profile is stored, but by setting the setter to private, we can only set the actual path within the class itself. So here we'll set it. There we go. And this should then take care of at least building the path. Before we are done with this, we may want to do a check to see whether that path actually exists or not. And if it doesn't, we will create it. If not, directory, which of course is in the system.io namespace, exists. Now, if this path does not exist, then we will try to create it. Directory.create directory path. There we go. Now, this should take care of handling our configuration path. Um, and now we can start adding in all the different settings that we can throw into this particular configuration file. Um, See, we will need at least a path to where the Minecraft server is, which in this case is on my D drive. We could also store a reference to the jar itself, and we could probably also set up the memory configuration for it, just like I did here. So let's put that in here. And of course for that we will need some properties. Miscellaneous properties. There we go. So let's start with the Minecraft path. We'll do a get and set on that. Leave it empty for now. We'll do a integer for the memory size. Get and set. We'll do, I don't know. Let's do a gigabyte default. We also want one for the Minecraft jar. Get set. We could actually do Minecraft server.jar just as a suggestion. And that takes care of that. Okay. Next up, we need some way to actually store these settings. So we will need some file I/O for that. There we go. And for this, of course, we will need some way of loading the config. And we also need some way of saving the config. There we go. Alright. First of all, we need to see if there actually is a configuration file. So let's see what we can come up with. We will most likely expand on this later on, in case we decide to allow this to run multiple different servers. We will at least need to change this. But for now, let's just do a default setup for one server. So we will grab a file name and grab the path that's already initialized and add in server profile CFG. We can do this any way we see fit. Perhaps we should actually build ourselves a nice little helper for this. How about we do this as a good old school ini file. It's human readable and it's fairly easy to pass through an ini file and grab the keys and the values in the sections and such. So we might as well make use of that. But how do we do that? Well, let's see about creating something to take care of that. Um, let's see. What namespace do we want to put it in? I think we'll just do config tools. There we go. And then create a class called an ini file. Okay, so anyone that has ever worked with configuration files has probably seen an ini file which looks something like this. Some kind of section or group, some kind of key equals some kind of value, and another section, another key equals different values. So that's pretty much it. Okay, so for this we will of course still need some kind of constructor. And just to make life easier on ourselves, we'll do a couple of different ones. And one that allows us to specify a path to a file, which will then trigger loading of the ini file. All right. Let's see, file IO. And these, of course, need to be public so we can specify them. I'm just full of typos today. And we also need a save. Now, I would like to overload these so I don't have to specify the file name if one already exists. So just to keep things a little more organized, load, and again for the save. There we go. Okay. Now I can keep these by themselves and do the overloads as I see fit. There we go. Alright. It would also be nice if we had a properties that tells us the current file path and file name that this particular instance of the ini file class is using. So for that we will put up a public string path, do a get and set, and we will also, hi, welcome to the stream. Feel free to ask any questions. And we also need a file name. There we go. Alright, so these will allow us to both set and expose the current path and the current file name of the ini file that this instance is working with, if one has been set. Now, just to make life a little easier for us, we'll add a few helper methods to help us handle all the path stuff. Since this one attempts to, well, to put it simple, it's for now it's supposed to start up the Minecraft server and be able to shut it down again. I'm planning to put in things like having the application watch the console output from the server to look for the little done loading statement that is dumped into the console. With that, I'll be able to do some UI changes indicating that the server is done starting up. I'll add the Archon protocol to it so we can actually communicate with the server and tell it to say save whenever needed. We'll do a chat message posting, something like 5 minutes before maintenance shutdown. It'll post a message in the game chat informing the players that the server is about to shut down for restart or reboot, whatever. And whatever else features we'll add down the line. Yep. Yep. Yes, exactly. It's exactly like a wrapper for the server console. I mean, if we do this quick, you'll see what I mean. Let's see if I can get the font a little bigger. There we go. Ah, needed to do it here, sorry. Okay, so right now I've pre-configured this to have an Archon profile. Archon is basically a network option that allows you to connect remotely to a Minecraft server and then have console access without actually sitting on the box where it's running. And Archon was originally developed by Valve, which is the company that runs Steam. And Archon was used to remotely control the different source products, as in executing console commands to, say, restart the server or vote for a new map on Counter-Strike and such. When Notch created Minecraft, he eventually adopted the Archon protocol, allowing us to remotely communicate with the console of a Minecraft server. However, this is not enabled by default. It's something that you have to enable in the server properties setup, which we can have a look at right here. For this, it's not particularly important for me to keep it secured because this particular Minecraft server is sitting behind my firewall, so I don't really care about publishing this particular password to it. Nobody will be able to connect to it anyways. But what you do is you set up a server port. Somewhere in this listing there's a Archon enabled as well. And then you of course have to put in some kind of password. You can choose this password any way you see fit. Oh, there it is. Enable Archon. When enable Archon is set true, the server expects to be able to find archon.password as well as archon.port. And these we will be using to control the server to have it shut down gracefully just by clicking a button on the UI. And of course we can also use the Archon protocol to say send a chat message to the server that it will then announce to every player that's currently online. So there are a lot of different things that we can do. But for now, we still need to build up some kind of configuration file, and for that I'm creating a simple ini file class, since we don't particularly need to set all that many options for the server to begin with. At first, we basically just need to know where the server instance is, which jar to use, how much memory to set aside, and then effectively have it launch. All right. Let's see. We kind of need a couple of things to update the path for where the configuration file is. So for that, we will do a internal little helper, which goes update path, and then file path name. There we go with the typos again. All right. The reason I'm using this parameter is because of both the load and the save methods have the file path name as a parameter, as well as the class constructor. By doing it this way, it allows us to do something along these lines. I'll put it in a comment here. Do a ini file, ini equals new ini file, c colon temp config ini, for example. By doing this, we can have it preload the config file and build up the collection of sections and keys and values. All right, for the load, first thing we will do is update the path. The same for the save. That way we don't have to remember doing it. And then we will work out the path. Okay, first of all, let's make sure that we actually have something that resembles a path. So any path that you build will typically have a drive letter, followed by a colon, followed by a backslash. This indicates the root of the drive. Then you specify a folder name and so on and so forth. So just to ensure that we actually did get a valid path, we'll check if this has a length greater than 0. If it does, then we'll see if the second character in the string is actually a colon, just to verify that it's a potentially valid path. And we can do that by specifying the index of 1. Now, yeah, pretty much. You can do a lot of stuff just by the simple standard in and out stream redirection, and then handle stuff from there. One thing about running a Minecraft server is that while you can task terminate it, it is always preferable to get the server to shut down on its own. One way of doing that is by using Archon communication with it. It just makes life so much easier and prevents not so good situations where the world can actually corrupt if you don't shut it down gracefully. So part of what I'm going to do here is build up a complete Archon class that we can use to actually network communicate with the server itself, as in send commands and receive responses from it. Exactly. We just send stop. Any kind of indexing is typically zero-based, so since we need to look at the second character, that means the first character will have an index of 0, the second character will have an index of 1, hence why we do 1. If this equals a colon, then we can pretty much assume that this is potentially a valid path. Alright, next up, let's split the path. We do this by searching for substring and then searching for the last index of a backslash. Now, since I want the trailing backslash on a path, I need to add 1 to the reference, and then we subtract that position from the length to get the total amount of characters that we need to copy. Just like this. Thank you very much, Sir Pinwheel. I'll be running this stream at least till about 6 this evening, so hope to see you later. Okay, next up we will copy the file name, and that's pretty much the same thing, except we start at the same position. Oh, sorry. This actually copies the file name itself, so we'll move that down here. And from here we need to start at the beginning of the string and then get the last index of, whoops, the backslash plus 1. There we go. We've split the path into the path property, and we've also split the file name into the file name property that we've got down here. Okay. Here we will just place a call to load and have it preload. Alright. Let's get some stuff built here. Structures. Okay, so any ini file has a some kind of section or grouping, and within that there is one or more keys with some kind of value attached to them. So effectively we need some way of building up a list of all the different sections that might be in there. We need some way of building up a list of all the keys that belong to each section. And for that I'm going to use the good old structures. They allow us to define custom data types that we can put stuff into. So we'll do these private. We don't want to expose them. We'll do struct and name this ini group, just for the sake of why not. We need a public string in this, which will be the name of it. And we also need some way of storing the individual key and value pairs, just like this. And for that we will do another struct. We will call this key pair and do a name and a value. There we go. And just for the sake of being able to initialize it, we'll do key pair string name, whoops, and string value. Name equals name trim, just to remove any kind of spaces. Value equals value trim. There we go. And down here we will do a key pair. I'll do this as an array and do keys. And again, we'll do, whoops, any group, string name. This just allows us to pre-initialize it when we create an instance of it. Name, name.trim, and we'll preset the keys to key pair 0. There we go. This just pre-initializes the array to have 0 entries. Okay. We also need some internal reference of this, so we'll do another array and name this groups. There we go. All right. So we should probably also add in some methods so we can both create the different sections or groups. Some choose to call them sections, some choose to call them groups. I've been working with ini files for as long as we have had a graphical Windows, and back in the day when they were introduced, they were called groups, hence why I chose to name it a group. The key can be anything. It can be named any way you see fit, and you can put whatever value in there. Since we will be referencing group names and key names, I chose to name them name. Okay. Let's get some methods on here so we can actually work with these. Public methods. There we go. All right. Now it would be nice if we can effectively just set a key value and get a key value and simply just reference the group it's in, the name of the key, and then either assign a value to it or retrieve a value. So we'll do a simple set value, string group name, string key name, string key value. And we'll do a similar to retrieve them. And I am really derpy on my keyboard today, sorry about that. Okay, get value, and again group name and key name so we know where to reference it. By doing this, it will make it faster and easier for us to actually use this particular ini class, because we can then simply do something like this, for example. String server name, for example, equals ini.getValue first server name. And that will then effectively loop through any number of sections that we have here. Let's see, we called it first server. And then we would have a key in here called name equals my Minecraft server. There we go. Now, since this is far from the first entry, this particular method would have to loop through all the different groups and all the different keys to find the exact one that we're looking for. And in a similar fashion, the set value would need to loop through the different groups, figure out if a group exists, if the specified group actually exists. If it doesn't, create it. Look through all the keys, figure out if the key exists. If it doesn't, create it, and then put the value in there. All right. Now, we've pre-created these. We will get back to these. For now, we will have a look and see if we can actually get some data in here. So, no, never mind. We'll do this one. Okay. So, first of all, we need to figure out whether the specified group actually exists. So let's loop through the groups and see if it actually does have a group name in there. There we go. All right. If and just because ini files have never been case sensitive, we'll make sure that this is case insensitive as well. Any kind of string comparison in C# is by default always case sensitive. So in this case, we will simply just lowercase all of it. Equals group name. Now we don't know if whoever's going to use this will do group names with spaces, prefixed and postfixed. So we'll start by just trimming it to make sure that it doesn't have leading or trailing spaces, and then to lower. And if this exists, then we'll do an index update. Index equals G, and then break out of the for loop. If we have an index of -1, that tells us that we didn't find the group that was specified. So we will resize our group array, adding 1 to the end of it, and then as the last index, do a new ini group, passing the group name as the name of it. And then we will update our index pointing to the last entry of the array. And this is pure error catching, better safe than sorry. If this is greater than -1, then we know that we have an index that points to some entry in the groups array. Next up, we need to figure out whether the key that was specified actually exists. So let's loop through the keys. K equals 0, K less than groups dot index dot keys dot length, and whoops, let's see if we have a key in here that fits. And in a similar fashion as above, we'll do a lowercase checking. If the k name to lower equals key name, again we don't know if there might be some spaces prefixed or postfixed, so we'll trim it again and figure out whether it exists or not. Now in this case we'll do another index variable in here, same as before, like this. do the key index equals k, break out of the for loop, and then figure out whether we need to add this particular key or whether we need to replace the existing value. So if index equals -1, then we know that this particular key doesn't exist. So we will again resize ref, but this time we are resizing the keys array. So we'll do this, keys length +1, and then we will do the keys, reference the length -1, and then add a new key pair. And in this case it'll be the key name as well as the key value. There we go. Now, since we're creating a new one here, we don't really need to first create it and then replace the information. So instead we will just do an else here, and this actually we'll do this instead. If it's greater than -1, there we go. If the key index, not the index, is greater than -1, then we know that it will only contain a valid range within the array. So here we'll just update the keys key index dot value equals the key value that we are assigning, and then trim it again just to make sure that there are no leading or trailing spaces. And if this is less than or equal to -1, then we know the entry doesn't exist, so we simply add it. And that pretty much takes care of the set value. In a similar fashion, when we need to retrieve a value, we first need to figure out if the group exists. We then need to figure out if the key, the specified key exists, and then return whatever value might be in it. And if none of them exists, then we effectively just break out and return nothing. So first of all, let's see if we can loop through the group. G less than groups.length, G++, there we go. And do a check on the name. Again, we'll do the toLower thing. Trim toLower. Now, if this is a match, then we know that we found the group. So we'll do another loop, which will loop through the keys of this particular group and do the same comparison. The lowercase thing, group keys, key.name, toLower equals the key name argument, trim it, and lower. Now, if we reach this point in the code, we have found both the group and the key, which means we need to return the value of this particular key. So that's what we'll do. Return the groups keys value. Now, since a return effectively exits the method, we don't need to worry about the rest of this loop setup. The only thing we need to worry about now is throwing something empty back. And this will only happen if either the group doesn't exist or the key within the found group doesn't exist. Um, and just to stop the actual execution of the first loop, we can do a break right here. The reason for doing this is to stop the continuous looping through arrays if we already know that there won't be more instances of this. And since we already found the group specified, but we didn't find the specified key, there's no point in continuing looping through the group names, so we'll just break out and return an empty string. Now, there will be arguments about using string.empty versus string an empty double quote, which also denotes an empty string. Personally, I prefer this setup with the double quotes, simply because it takes less effort to type them, but the result is pretty much the same. Okay, now we have options to set a value within on a key within a group, and we have an option to retrieve that particular value. So it would kind of be nice if we could also get a list of all the different groups that we have in here. So let's see if we can set up a method to do that. We'll go down here and do a public string array get groups, and for that we need some kind of result. So we'll set this as a new list of strings equal length to the number of groups that are currently defined. So and then we'll loop through them, less than groups length, and copy over the names of the different groups. So result.g equals groups.g.name. There we go. And this will then return a complete list of all the different groups that are in the ini structure. From there, it would be nice to be able to get a list of keys from a specific group. So we'll do that as well. Get group keys, string group name. We kind of need to specify which group to get the keys from. So we'll do the same thing here, except this time we will start off with a length of 0. And then return the result. And then we need to loop through the groups again to see if we can find the group that was specified. If name to lower equals the group name specified, then we found the group that we are looking for. So from here we need to copy over all the key names. So we'll set the resulting list equal to the number of keys that exists within this particular group. So just like before, we will copy over those names into the result list, just like this. There we go. And since we found the group, we don't need to do any further group processing, so we'll just break out of the for loop, returning the list of key names. Nice. Okay. this should be enough to at least get some information about the ini file. Of course, it would be nice to be able to actually remove keys and remove groups and so on and so forth, which is also something we can do. And for that, I'm just gonna snag a quick snippet of mine, which is something that needs to go here. So let's grab that, get my snippets, a option to remove a specific while keeping all the previous entries. There we go. And we will go down here and public remove key, string, group name, and the key name. This is meant to remove the specified key from the specified group. So let's see if we can find it first. And actually, I think I'll go do a few changes here. We'll do a helper method that can find a group index for us. And to do that, we go through the list of group names to see if we can find it. If equals the group name, then we return the index of the counter, and if nothing was found, return -1. And in a similar fashion, we'll do another helper, private int get key index, group group index, and then the key name. There we go. Just to make sure that we actually got a valid index greater than or equals to 0, and the index is less than the length of our groups, then we can do this. Again, return -1 if nothing was found or the group index was out of bounds. Here we go through the keys, and again check if group index keys name equals the name specified. Whoops, trim to lower. If this was found, then we return the counter. Otherwise, we return -1. So this will just make all of this weird looping through all of the different arrays time and time again. We'll be able to do something like this instead. Group index equals get group index group name. If group index greater than -1, then int key index equals get key index group index and key name. If key index greater than -1, then we can return this. Of course, here we need to use the group index, and here we need to use the key index. And in all other cases, return nothing. And the same pretty much goes down here. Since we pretty much do the same thing. Loop through the array to see if we can find this particular group. We might as well rename this to group index and see if we can actually get it. Group name. Oops. Group name. And this then lets us change this to group index as it should have been. And update this one. There we go. And rename this. And then here we can do exactly the same thing. Get key index, since we already have the group index, and remove this. If key index greater than -1, then update the value, and if that's not the case, then add it. And there we go. We got rid of a couple of loops here and there. This one we can't, of course. This one we can't. Although we could actually do it here, since group index equals get group, whoops, get group index group name. If group index greater than -1, then loop through the keys, copy them over, and we're done. And of course, here we need to specify the group index like this. And index here. There we go. Of course, these could be changed to one-liners. Some like them, some don't. Okay, remove key. Let's see if we have a matching group index. Group name. If group index greater than -1, then we actually did find the group. And for the sake of keeping the indexes alive, we will see if we can get the key index for the specified key name. Now, if a key index is greater than -1, that means we actually did get a reference to a key pair within this particular group, and that's the one we need to remove. So, array remove, ref groups group index dot keys, comma, this is the index we need to remove. And this effectively just makes sure that this particular entry is removed, while keeping the rest of it intact. There we go. We also need to do one for the group, remove group. So let's put in the group name, see if we can get an index for it. Get group index, group name, and if we actually did get one, then array remove groups and the group index. Job done. Alright, we now have the option to get and set values within the structure itself. We can get a list of all the existing groups. We can get a list of all the existing keys within a group. We can remove specific keys, and we can remove specific groups. The reason we need all of this is so we can properly maintain a list of or properly maintain all of the different groupings, keys, and values. last thing we need to do is add in some file I/O so we can actually load and save this particular ini structure. But before I do that, I think I'm just going to go through these quick and add in some documentation. The path to the current ini file, the name of the current ini file. There we go. For the get value, retrieves the value of the specified key within the specified group. The group to find and the key to find within the group. Returns the value of the specified key within the specified group. There we go. And the same for this. Creates or updates this value of the specified key within the specified group. The group to find or create. The key within the group. Within the group to find or create. The value to update or create. Oh, where did that D come from? Let's get rid of that. There we go. Fetches a list of all existing group names. Returns a list of all existing group names. There we go. Fetches a list of key names within the specified group. A group to fetch key names from. Returns a list of key names within the specified group, or nah, that's fine. There we go. Removes the specified key within the specified group. The group to find, the key to remove. Removes a group and all keys within this group. The name of the group to remove. There we go. Okay. All right. This might all be a little bit boring, but at the end of the day, this would potentially be a class that you could reuse for whatever configurations you might need in the future. Of course, these already exist in hundreds of different creations. Might even be able to find one online somewhere. I'm just doing this to see how you can build it up from scratch if you don't want to rely on some external library somewhere. All right. Now, next we need to do some actual loading and saving. So let's have a look at that. First of all, If someone places a call to the empty argument load method, then we need to figure out whether the path and the file name has been set. We could even add in a, actually let's do that, come to think of it, where did I put it? Properties here. We can do a full one, public string file path name. These we will do manually. If we're getting this, then we'll just add these together. However, if it's being set, then we will do this and do place a call to update path with whatever value was passed to it. This then gives us the freedom of having the path split separately, we have the file name split separately, or we have them both combined. Just makes it a little easier to cross-handle things. The fully qualified path and name of the current ini file. There we go. Alright. Here, let's see if we actually have a path. If so, if file path name length greater than 0, this is then of course a reference to the property. Let's see if this particular file exists. We need to include this system.io namespace for this, of course. If this particular file name exists, then we can attempt to try to load it. String data equals nothing. Whenever doing file operations, always make sure that you wrap them in a try-catch. Read all text. We'll do the text processing later. File path name, of course. Catch we use to reset the data to an empty string. And then from here, if the length of whatever we loaded up is greater than 0, then parse the actual text. Alright. Now here, since we are already updating the file path name, we'll simply place a call to load. There we go. And here we will do pretty much the same thing. Check if we have a potentially valid file name. Then to make sure that we are not trying to create a file in a folder that doesn't exist, we'll start to by making sure that the destination path actually does exist. And since we already have the update path helper method to take care of all the path handling, path and file name split handling and all that stuff for us, we can simply just specify the path property, and that will then be the full path to where this particular file resides or will be placed. But since we needed to figure out whether the path existed or not, we'll do a not, which will then push us into an attempt at creating this particular path. So again, file operations, always wrap them in try-catch. At least that will prevent your application from crashing. And here we'll attempt to create the folder or the path. Now, if it doesn't work out, then tough luck. This section checks whether the path exists. If it doesn't, attempts to create it. Next up, just to make sure, we'll see if it exists. If it does, then we have a potential of being able to actually write this file. But before we do that, we need to figure out if this particular configuration file exists previously. If it does, we need to remove it so we can overwrite it with a new one. So let's see if it actually exists. If file exists, file path name, then again a try catch, file.delete this one, and we don't really care about any kind of errors that might occur here. So we'll check that the file now doesn't exist. If it doesn't exist, then we'll be able to create it. So file path name, since we need the full reference to it, and then we shall try to write it, which would be write all text to file path name, comma, some kind of data reference. Since we don't have that yet, we'll do a temporary one here, and then replace it later. To do replace with string built ini data. There we go. And from here we will place a call to save, just like we did in the load method, and that's pretty much it. So what do we need now? We need something that can actually read through something similar to this, and we also need something that can generate this. Now, one of the major differences between the different operating systems is how text files are handled. Part of it is about line termination. On Linux and Unix based systems, you simply use a new line to indicate the end of a text line, whereas on Windows systems you use a carriage return line feed to indicate end of line. In C and C#, Java as well for that matter, a \r indicates a carriage return, and a \n indicates a new line, or line feed as it's also called. Now the \r equals a character 13 for the ASCII table, and the \n equals a character 10 on the ASCII table. These are standard end-of-line characters that are used all the time. Since this is a Windows-based application, I will be using the Windows format for it, which is RN. Okay, so let's build a method down here that can create a proper ini file for us. So build ini, and the only thing this ever needs to do is return some kind of result. Now some prefer using string builder objects. I don't. The major reason for not using a string builder object is that you are effectively instantiating another object in memory that you really don't need to instantiate just to make life a little bit easier for yourself. Programming is to some extent about being lazy, not writing more than you actually need to do, but there's also a cost of doing things the lazy way. String building is not particularly complicated. Um, just to make life a little easier for myself, I'll do a const here, crlf equals. That way I don't have to sit and type this every time. I can just add crlf to the end of the string. So let's go through the groups. G less than mart groups.length, g++. Since this is a new group, we need to create a new header like this. So we'll start by doing that. Result equals one of these plus the name of the group and one of these, and finish off with a line break. Next off, we need to loop through all the keys. K less than the current group, the number of keys, and then we need to build up this format, which is the key name followed by an equal sign followed by whatever value goes in there, which should be fairly easy to do as well. Result, this would then be the keys k.name plus the equal sign plus whatever value is currently in that key. There we go. And then end of line. Job done. Next up, since we're now done listing all the keys within this particular group, we will make sure that there is always one empty line following any section. It just makes it so much easier for us derpy humans to actually read what's in there. So to do that, we simply add another carriage return line feed, and that's pretty much it. This is it for the code needed to actually build the entire ini file structure, which would generate something along this line. Pretty straightforward, nothing too complex. So let's grab this and throw it in here instead. And we can remove this, and we're done. We can now save to an ini file. The next part is a little bit more complicated, which involves us being able to actually read the text and convert it into our structure array. And for that, we actually need to read through the text one line at a time and then analyze what's in there. Just to make sure that I don't forget, set this to a length of 0, and we will do this in the parser method as well. Actually, we should probably do it here, just to make sure. I like to go through and just be on the safe side of things whenever I create new variables of some kind. I don't just declare them, I also preset them with a default value. The reason for doing that is to avoid null pointer exceptions and uninstantiated objects and all the other weird things that people run into because they forget to initialize their variables. So since the beginning, when I started programming some, I don't know, 30 years ago, I've just made it a good habit to pre-initialize all my variables. And it's definitely something that, in my opinion, I think people should get into the habit of doing. That way they are always sure that they actually have something to work with. Anyway, back to the task at hand. let's go down here to the load method, which is right here. See here, we need to parse the actual text. Now, as I mentioned before, we do have situations where we don't exactly know which operating system or which program created this particular ini file. For our program here, we will assume that we wrote the contents of that file, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you actually get the carriage return line feed structure in the file itself. So one of the things that we're going to do is convert whatever text we loaded in to only have line feed markers as end-of-line indicators, because then we fully support any of the different platforms that we're currently that we currently have access to, meaning we can get an ini file from a Unix system, from a Linux system, from any version of Mac OS, potentially from Android, potentially from iOS for iPhones and tablets, as well as any version of Windows and DOS. So that's just the easy way of getting past that particular problem. Okay, so let's get this parse ini set up and start by splitting the contents of the ini file into individual lines. And in the process of doing that, we will start by replacing the carriage return character with nothing, and then splitting at any occurrence of a line feed. So to do that, we start by replace the carriage return with an empty string, and then we split on any occurrence of a new line. There we go. This now ensures that we always have a compatible line split marker, and that we end up getting actual lines of text instead of having the full text including line breaks and all that other junk that we don't really need to handle this properly. Okay, next up we need to make sure that our group is empty. So to do that, we'll just reset it back to have 0 entries, and then we will start looping through the lines. L less than lines length L plus plus. Okay, so for now we will grab one line off the list, trim it to make sure there are no leading or trailing spaces, and just to make sure that a tab character doesn't get in the way, we can also do a replace any existence of a tab character with a space and then trim it. That will then effectively convert any tab indented entries into spaces. If they are leading or trailing, those spaces will be removed. Alright. Since we don't exactly know what's in this particular line, we need to figure that out. So first of all, let's see if this line actually contains something. So if it has a length greater than 0, then there's something in it. Then we need to figure out what's in it. Now, ini files have always supported two types of comments, one of them being a hashtag and another one being a semicolon. These are command lines that are supported by most ini interpreters, so we will be courteous and do the same. Not that we particularly need it, but this just allows this particular class to be more versatile for potential future use. So let's first figure out if the first character in a line is a hashtag or a semicolon. If it is, then we'll simply skip it. If the first character in the line equals either a hashtag or it equals a semicolon, then this is a comment, we skip it. Now, since we don't particularly need to handle comments as such, we'll just do if it doesn't match a hashtag and it doesn't match a semicolon as the first character, then it's something that we potentially need to handle, which would be either a group name or a key value pair. So let's figure out if this is actually a group name. So if line index of, and now my Visual Studio went derpy again, greater than -1, and it also has a end bracket. This is a group. Else if this particular line contains an equal sign, then we'll assume that this is a key value pair. And I need to restart my Visual Studio to get IntelliSense working again. Sorry about that. It's something that unfortunately happens from time to time. I'm not the only one having this particular issue. Do a quick Google and you'll see how many thousands of hits we get on this particular issue. Anyway, here we know that this is potentially a group. So we expect to have some kind of text within the brackets. So first of all, we will start by cutting away whatever is at the end of the line, including the trailing bracket. Reason for doing this is if somebody decides to do something along the lines of group name, this is for blah. This would constitute a comment. So by grabbing this part, selecting the trailing bracket and cutting away the remainder of the line, the rest we need to do is just replace the leading bracket, and that will then give us the full name without any additional stuff that might be after the closing bracket. So let's start by grabbing here from the beginning of the string to where the trailing bracket is. Since this part right here is the length of, or rather the number of characters being copied, and we are looking to fetch the position of the trailing, the first occurrence of the trailing closing bracket, sorry, we'll just copy it from here. That will replace it. And then we'll do a replacement of the leading bracket with nothing, trim it to remove any existing spaces, and we should be good. Alright. Now, since this is now a group name, we actually need to add a new group. And to keep things correctly indexed, we will add a variable to take care of that. And we'll set that to -1 to begin with. Since there's no array index at position -1, that indicates that we are before the beginning of the list. In any case, we need to add a new group, so let's do that. Resize, no, array.resize our groups with one more entry, and then throw the group name into this new group that we've added. And then let's refresh the group index with the current length. Now, by doing this, we don't have to search for the group that we're currently working with. We have already pre-indexed it. Now, for a key value pair, we know that there has to be an equal sign in there. However, a key value pair can also be empty like this. So, how do we fix this? Well, we start off by simply looking for the equal sign and then effectively doing a couple of substrings, one of them grabbing the key name and the other one grabbing whatever is past the equal sign, if anything. Others would probably suggest doing a regular string split, but if for some reason, let's say we have a memory setup that goes initial equals 100. This is a valid value of a key within an ini file. However, if you do a string split, you end up getting 3 parts in the string array instead of just getting 2, because it will also split here. So doing it manually by just doing a substring will ensure that we always have the key and whatever is in the value without actually affecting the value. So we will grab the key name, string key name equals line.substring, start at the beginning, look for the equal sign, and since we don't need the equal sign, we can use the position, which is one less than the actual number of characters. So this will do nicely, and then again, just to make sure, get rid of any leading or trailing spaces, and then we'll do a key value, which would then start at there we go, start at the position of the first occurrence of the equal sign, but since we need whatever is past the equal sign, we'll do +1. And then we shall grab the length of it minus this particular position. There we go. Now, if I run this and we have an empty key, meaning key name equals this, then this particular line of code will fail. The reason for that failure is A, because we're trying to copy past the end of the string, and B, because we are attempting to grab a negative length of the string. Or rather, we are potentially trying to do that. So the one thing that we can do to try and figure out whether we should actually do this is wait doing this We'll put it here for now, and then check whether the equal sign is the last character of the string. If line.index of equal sign equals line.length -1. If it is, then we basically just need to use an empty string. However, if we do this, then we can safely assume that we can copy it over. There we go, problem solved. Now, next up, we kind of need to figure out whether we actually have a group to put this key and value into. And if we don't, say if somebody does something like this, key equals blah, then this is basically an orphaned key. It doesn't have a group that it belongs to. So, what do we do? Well, for that, we will simply do a check that says if the group index is greater than -1, then do all this stuff. And only then. If we don't have a group to put a key into, then yeah, it might be a key, but we'll ignore it for now. There we go. And this should effectively take care of it. The only thing left to do is to add the key pair to the current group keys, which of course needs to be an array.resize ref group index keys and group index keys dot length, not dot kek +1, and stuff the value in there. Group index keys group index again, keys dot length -1 equals new key pair, and then we use the key name and the key value. There we go. And this should take care of reading through the ini file and stuffing all the group names and the key names and the values of each individual key into our structure array. And that's pretty much it. We now have a tool for both reading and writing ini files, and we can manipulate the contents of individual keys within individual groups. So that means we now have something to make it easier for us to save and load our profile, because we don't have to pre-generate some weird config format. We've actually written a small class to follow an already established format that pretty much anybody knows. And just for the sake of it, again, since we are messing with Minecraft today, we'll have a look at the server properties. Now, the interesting thing about server properties is that it actually does follow, for the most part, a regular ini file format, except there's no grouping. So we could potentially cheat our way into having our ini class both load and save the contents of the server properties file. That's the main reason I chose the ini file as the basis for our configuration. Simply because it makes cross-handling of settings a little easier for us. Okay. Let's go back to our profile setup. Now, If we wanted to, we could expand this at a later date to include more than one server profile. And just to pre-configure this to effectively allow us to do that, we will pre-design our config file to properly support more than one server profile. And to do that, we will simply do, we need an ini file, which it of course doesn't know at the moment. It's new ini file and then the file name. There we go. Using C# libs config tools, there we go. It now knows the ini file. And we can then, actually we should probably do the save config first. Just because we can. String file name equals path plus server profile, CFG, ini file, ini equals new ini file, or actually we should probably just preload this class. Yeah, we might as well do that. Alright, we shall put it this would be the config path. Yeah, let's do that. We do this ini file config ini equals new ini file. There we go. And then we don't need this. Alright. Let's see. At the moment we don't have any internal support for multiple profiles. It's something we can expand on later. So for now we will just do a little bit of ahead of time setup. So here we will make sure that we config ini set value, do a group called profiles, do a key called count, and then do a key value of 1. This just ensures that we will get a group called profiles containing a key named count and having a value of 1. Again, written just set up so we can support this in the future. It's not particularly important at the moment, but we'll do this. Next up, let's set value profile 1, which is the group name. Set up the Minecraft path and fetch the property Minecraft path and stuff that in the ini file. And then we'll do set value in profile 1, do one called jar and grab the Minecraft jar property, and then the profile 1, do the memory setup, and in this case since memory size is an integer, we will have to convert it to string. So memory size to string. There we go. Whoops. That's it. And then we do the config ini.save and specify the file name above. That's it. And up here in the load, we'll do something similar. We'll grab the for now, we'll ignore the profile count. The Minecraft path equals config ini dot actually, well, whoops, this is where I wanted it. config ini.load file name. There we go. And then we can do the Minecraft path equals config ini.getValue from profile1. We shall get the key named Minecraft path, Minecraft jar, which specifies the jar file name. We'll do fetch that from the ini file, and then of course we need to do a little bit of number conversion, and for that we will create a simple little exit string value, which will handle all of it for us. Int result equals 0, return result. If not int try parse value out result, then return 0. That's it. This effectively just converts a string representation into an integer result if it is possible. If not, it'll return 0. But this allows us to memory size equals fixint, fixint config ini get value profile1 and get the key named memory. There we go. That's all there is to it. This made it a heck of a lot easier to both load and save our Minecraft server profile by utilizing the newly created inifile class. Now, I'll make all of this available on a GitHub repository, and anyone who wants to use this is perfectly welcome to do so. Make changes, throw up suggestions, ask questions, throw requests, whichever. If you want to ask something, please go ahead. Don't hold back. But for now, this at least takes care of a quick and dirty configuration for a server profile. So let's do some UI stuff for it. There we go. Well, this should be fairly simple. We need some kind of path reference to where the Minecraft instance resides. Let's stop this quick. There we go. We also need a location, or we need the jar, and we need to allow for some kind of memory setup. So the quick and easy way of doing this is just to pop a file open dialog, and then let the user specify the Minecraft jar, server jar, and by doing so we end up getting the path to where the server is located, as well as the jar, so that updates 2 of the 3 properties of the server profile. And we will handle the memory configuration using a numeric up-down box, because it allows us to both use arrow keys, mouse wheel, as well as type in a numeric value and then update it from there. Okay, so let's do some UI stuff. Path to Minecraft server. There we go. And we need a text box right here. Now for this we will allow the user to both type in a full path as well as do a browse button that they can click to open it. So we'll rename this to Minecraft server path. There we go. Do a button. A button. Holy smokes, we have a button. Let's stuff it here. Looks good. We'll do open. And put open in there. And then let's see, memory. Memory info. Memory. And in here somewhere we have a numeric up down right there. And yes, we do have options to effectively ask Windows how much physical memory the computer has. And it's something that we can add in later. It's not particularly important right now. But let's start by setting this to maximum of 8 gigs just for the fun of it, and set a minimum of 128 megabytes of memory. No, actually, if memory serves, the minimum is 256 now. So it'll always default to 256 to begin with. Okay. We will also do another button here. Save, and do save here, and then we'll do some handling of all this stuff. Now we know that we definitely need to handle the open button in case the user is too lazy to type in the full path to where his Minecraft server is, in this case me. So we definitely need the click event of the button, and we also need the click event of the save. And now we need to do a little bit of house cleaning. And this is just my personal preference. However you choose to organize your project and your code is entirely up to you, but I do suggest that you, at least to some extent, try to keep things organized. If you just throw all the code in there in one huge jumble, as the projects grow, it becomes more and more impossible for you to keep track of where everything is, and you need to make extensive use of the search within the IDE. It's usually a little quicker and easier if you can just try to keep some form of logical organization of your code. This is the way I choose to do it. We have some form events, which would include something like the load event of the form. I'll move that down here. These would constitute control events, so I'll put them in control events, and end region here. Now this one, yeah, we probably need this because at some point we definitely need to load the profile, the current configuration. So this would be a nice place to do it. We probably also need to update both the text box that contains the path to the server as well as the memory setting. And the best place to do that during an application load is to put it in the shown event. So we'll hook that right away. Shown. There we go. And since this is a form event, I'll move that up to the form events. There we go. Alright. It's something that we need for the future. At the moment, let's just see if we can get some of this functional. So let's start with the open button. For that, we would like to use a file open file dialog. We'll just call it dialog, and there we go. Here we need to set up a filter of some kind, which would be Minecraft server jar, not har, jar, har. Do this, and we need to make sure that we can't multi-select because we're currently only supporting one, and that should be it. So let's see if we can show the dialog and let's make it modal to this form, meaning our main form will be locked until the open file dialog is closed. And if the user clicks the open button, the dialog result will always be OK. So this means we have a potential file. And when we're done, clean up after ourselves by disposing the dialog. And yes, I know that this could be thrown into a using statement for things like file dialogs and such. I personally don't like doing that. I prefer doing things manually to make sure that I remember to do things the way they are supposed to be done. Such as making sure that I properly clean up after myself by disposing of the dialog that I don't no longer need. It's a force of habit. Do it the way you see fit, the way you want to do it, but make sure that you always clean up after yourself one way or another. Not cleaning up after yourself leads to memory bloating, and memory bloating leads to sluggish applications and eventual crashes. So always clean up after yourself. Just like your mama told ya. And me. Anyway, one thing that we could actually force the dialog to do for us is to check if the selected file actually does exist. That way we don't need to pre-check it. We can effectively just assume that the chosen file actually does exist. So since we still need to do a lot of things, we'll just throw it in here for now. And then we can do a test run and see if this actually works, which it should. So let's see what happens. Let's go grab one of these, and here, there. We need to go in here and in here, and we can select the Minecraft server jar, and we can only select jars. It worked. Nice. Next step would of course be putting this into our small server profile config. But before that, I need a quick nature break, so I will be back shortly.